Another member of our panel who did make it in. Thanks very much for joining us. David Webb joining us now. Thank you.
Good to see you, Joe. Good to see you, David.
So we were saying earlier that there's a lot of problems with trains apparently this morning, people being able to make their way here, but we're glad that you made it in.
I made it.
So you were the founder of the Tea Party 365?
Right, the New York Tea Party organization. We're an independent group, and I guess we're in the largest city in America, so we're trying to do our best.
All right. Well, so one of the things we were talking about before we went over to Rena is the situation in the Mideast. And we talked a little bit specifically about Libya, but then there becomes the question, how do you decide where you're going if you are the United States, and what determines where you intervene, as we are now in Libya?
There are two sides to that answer. One is the one people don't like to hear, and that's the political philosophy side of it. What is in your best interest as a nation? It's nice to think that we can save the world, but we can't. So nations as a whole, no matter who they are, have to think first what's in their best national interest. Humanitarian comes into play along with that, not necessarily below it or after it, but you choose where to go. The question becomes...
Well, when you're talking about a humanitarian goal, you can't really point to that because we have people dying in Libya as a direct result of the government. We have the same thing happening in Yemen. We have the same thing happening in Syria.
That's the problem, is you have to choose, one, your national interest, where you spend your resources and your expenditures. Two, can you do something about it? I mean, sub-Saharan Africa has tens of thousands of deaths a month. Where do you choose for different reasons to apply yourself? There are murderous autocrats and dictators around the world. Chavez in Venezuela. And we have the Middle East. It's not just the Middle East. So the question then becomes, do you choose the political philosophy answer, which is what's in our national interest, which is a little bit too insular for America's role in the world?
Maybe countries that have oil?
Yeah, and
that's certainly a big motivator.
But let's go to a point. Here's one of the major failures of Mideast policy. We arm, we train, we sell weapons, airplanes, etc. to the Arab League. They should be at work, or at the very least, they should be paying us back in cash for what we're doing for them. The problem is that we have not exerted properly our influence, and we have also not tied our foreign policy to humanitarian efforts effectively. The UN's a sham. Okay, Susan Rice might as well have an office there that she never leaves, because the UN is a sham. And our Mideast policy is a joke, and it has been in so many respects, not just in recent times, but for many years, because we're not tying humanitarian to it, we're not making demands, and that's one of the problems, is these autocrats and dictators don't respond to niceties and handshakes.
Well,
it's unfortunate. It's not all a sham, and it's not all a joke. And the rest of the world, for example, the rest of NATO, does not view this UN effort as a sham. They take it seriously, and the French and the British are very involved in what we're doing now in Libya.
What did happen to
and
the Arab League?
hopefully we get lucky and they do take up more of the responsibility.
Joe, and I understand that, and I don't. But they sit in Brussels and decide, well, maybe we won't take command. Yeah, you know why? The majority of the resources in play, regardless of who wants to claim the titular title of ruler of the Libyan conflict, whatever general wants to get it, are American resources, and that is a fact. NATO itself, even though we had and have an American commander, is still bound by this rule of committee. And I got news for the world. You can't run a country or a war, in some cases, by committee. Certainly not a war. And a war by committee, generally, as we've proven from military tactics, is a failure.
But it's not a war.
It's, you know what, when you're shooting at people,
that before you got here.
When you're shooting at people and they're shooting back, it's either you're in a worse neighborhood somewhere in the world or you're in a war. You can nuance the definitions, but you're in an action. Let's be fair. Let's call it a military action. That's more accurate.
I think we should call it a war.
But right now, what I think a lot of people don't like is that this is not a clearly defined or definable situation.
Yeah, it's not a clearly defined mission, and there's no clearly defined end game.
And I don't think we're going to see anybody standing on an aircraft carrier going mission accomplished anytime soon. We don't see that. I think have to gauge our involvement in this. I was interested in what went on in the news yesterday. But it's a different day today, and it's going to be a different situation. I'm in the hopefully the United States has some luck in terms of Libya, and we are able to provide resources and then move ourselves back.
What should the end game be? I mean, do you think that it should be a change in regime? Should we, say, okay, our goal is to get Gaddafi out of power, and if we have to, use force to do so? Or is it a wise move to possibly leave him there and then have him again begin international terrorism?
You ever play chess blind, where all the pieces feel the same? You can't tell the difference between the knight, the queen, and the rook? That's pretty much what we're doing in Libya. What we have in Libya is we don't even know who all the parties are, who all the influencers are. We have one rebel leader who does admit to the news, to The Guardian in the UK, that he has al-Qaeda help and al-Qaeda ties.
Yeah,
we are also looking at a situation. Let's think about what we do if we begin to arm the rebels, not knowing fully who they are. What kind of arms do you give them, and how do you use them? Think of Project Gunrunner. One of the failures of that project was when you give a gun to somebody, it can be reloaded and reused. Do we give the rebels heavy anti-tank weaponry? Do we give them ASMs? What kind of weaponry do we give them? The problem here is we don't have a clearly defined battle with clearly defined sides, and we don't know the outcome. And by the way, if we're going to decide, the president says Gaddafi must go, and the State Department says, well, we're not sure. Gaddafi's sitting there going, from his point of view, hey, I'm fighting to the end, because he's got nowhere to go. And he is a brutal terrorist, dictator, supporter of terrorism. They don't know he doesn't have weaponized mustard gas, but what if he passes that on to other elements who manage to weaponize it before we take him out? We've either got to go and surgically kill this guy or capture him, preferably kill him, in my opinion, get him off the table, take out his sons, and then move forward and try to at least get some stability and get out.